We are here today at the Pecos National Monument, which is in an area where about 2,000 people lived at its height. We're going to see the remnants of this facility here, which housed up to 2,000 people. The Pecos Indians that lived here lived along the Santa Fe trade route. The Santa Fe trade route went from Independence, Missouri, all the way into Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's where travelers could re-up on supplies and water and rest and get the trail news. This is the area that they lived in. They did farming here and, like I said, a lot of trade. This is what remains of what was part of the main part of this pueblo, and we are right by it. It's amazing to think of all the people that lived here and traded here and farmed here and played here. And it's unfortunate, but the Native American communities in this area did not always get along, and crime was a big problem. Most communities create a boundary around their space, and the pueblos in this area are no exception. A lot of these walls here are part of the original boundary that kind of let people know that they were either inside or outside of the pueblo space. How much work did it take to put these guys together? This area here is probably a crevasse, which would have been a hole dug out with a entrance on the top where they would do some religious ceremonies and prayer. This here is another example of a dugout and supported area where either they would have done religious ceremonies or stored food. And another one. Between 1914 and 1928, this area was excavated by archaeologists to kind of discover more about the history of the people. And what we're looking at here is also what we're looking at here. And probably down in that little prairie area is where a lot of the trade outside of the Pueblo habitative area would have taken place. In the mid-1500s, the Spanish came and tried to conquer this area. They also tried to convert the people to Catholicism and make them loyal to the Spanish crown. When that didn't go over well, oftentimes they enslaved the people and caused a lot of damage to the area as they were trying to conquer the area. But the Spanish weren't the only people that were trying to conquer this area. Other native tribes tried their best. The Comanche and the Apache had a lot of fights and wars in this area. They would take the people, turn them to slaves, steal their cattle, their tools, and sometimes they would even murder the people. So although this area has a rich history, it is not free of violence. The people who lived here kept busy during the day. They had a lot of work to do to prepare their food and their clothing, continued to repair and also build up their pueblo. Here's an image of what this area would have looked like before we got here. And down at the bottom you can see another crevasse, which is this right here. And they did a lot of underground ceremonies there, probably about 200 years ago. They found, when they did some archaeological digs, some flutes. So I would assume music was important to them too. This area was ideal for people to live in because it has the Pecos River and other natural springs and a few other smaller creeks. Of course, water would have to be transported, usually in ceramic pots, back to where the people are living. This area was attempted to be conquered by the Spanish more than once. After they left, after the mid 1500s, they came back in the late 1600s and tried to work more peacefully with the locals here. But unfortunately, the Comanche were constantly attacking. And so in let's see, around the early 1700s, the governor of New Mexico, Juan Bautista de Anza, which if you're from Anza, you know that he also went through that area. He became governor and he tried to sign a peaceful treaty with the Comanche, but it didn't go over as planned. This area here was a natural pass-through and brought a lot of people to the Pueblo for trading and just replenishing of supplies. This made the Pueblo here almost like a military station because they were set up high and could see anybody coming in. This area is neat in that you can see all the small rooms that they had built in this area. Remember, there was about 2,000 people who lived here, and unfortunately they didn't stay forever because of drought, because of disease, because of migration, because of the Comanche, because people were constantly trying to take over their area because it was so well established along a great trade route and such a unusually large communal space for people to live. Eventually the Pueblos here kind of gave in and they moved to the Jemez area, which as the crow flies is maybe 100 miles west of here. But we're getting closer to the remains of the old part. This area was the largest and most powerful pueblos in northern New Mexico when the Spanish established their mission here. A few years later, in 1625, the first church was completed, and that's kind of what we're looking at. And then also the foundation is still remaining here. But unfortunately, the arrival of the Spanish really brought sweeping changes to this area and dramatically changed the lives of the Pecos people forever. Again, you can kind of see the outline of the church that was here. How amazing must this have been when it was in its great glory. In 1821 until 1880, this area, like I said, was part of the Santa Fe trade route. And it wasn't until 1880 that the railroad came in, and when the railroad came in, well, then the trade route wasn't as popular or even necessary because train was a lot easier than horseback. When the Spanish were here initially, the Pueblo people did not like it. There was a lot of oppression, a lot of epidemics, drought was happening at the same time, and so the Pueblo people wanted to come together and revolt. Because there wasn't really any calendars that we know of, calendars that are similar to ours today, they took rope and they tied knots in it, and then every day they untied the knot until there was no knots left. And that's when they knew they were all to come together, and the plan was to destroy this mission, which sort of symbolized the power of the Spanish. After the first church was destroyed, the Spanish left, but then they returned 12 years later and built a second church. Construction of this church was done really, really well. Look how thick these walls are. Look how many rooms there are. It must have taken a long time to establish this church here. And it still stands today. Wow, how wide do you think that is?
5, 6.
Dong, 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 dong. How neat is it that we can still be a part of this history and learn from it, enjoy it, appreciate it, recognize it for what it was, some good, some bad. Hope you enjoyed your tour of the Pecos.